So you finally realize that business just doesn't walk in the front door or fall out of the sky.
Apparently it doesn't, yeah. This is the 20-minute Attorney Business Development Podcast. My name is Tobi Steinemann, and here with me to discuss business development for young attorneys is the man who, if I knew him 15 years ago, might have saved my legal career, Bill Burns.
Hi, Toby. So are you saying you miss being an attorney?
I think I sometimes, after I left the law, thought about going back and what I'm maybe missing out, but it has been a while now, and I'm quite happy where I am.
Well, that's good to hear. But, I get asked almost every day about what young attorneys should do. And, rather than hearing from me, maybe our listeners would like to hear, what your experience was as a young attorney in terms of business development.
Well, so I worked in a small commercial law firm here in Basel, Switzerland, and I think probably like most young attorneys when they start practice, I didn't really think about business development a lot. During my first weeks and months, I basically was scared of the whole responsibility that suddenly was on my table. Suddenly people kept coming to me, asking me for advice and relying on that advice. So I was basically figuring that out. And only after getting a little bit the hang of things, I think I started noticing how our partners thought about actually managing their firm. And I started realizing that business development is quite an important quite an important part in this. And up until today, I still remember that one partner particularly we had, she always had these big cases and we worked quite long hours on these cases. And whenever one of these cases was concluded, I was like, okay, we now have some time to breathe and take it a bit slower. And she was like that for one day maybe. And then she started thinking about, okay, where's the next big case coming from? And that was always kind of a bit of a surprise to me, because I figured, why can't she enjoy that period a little bit longer, because the next case will be coming. But obviously it was her responsibility and she had to actively do something to get that case, and they're not just coming to you by doing nothing.
So you finally realized that business just doesn't walk in the front door or fall out of the sky.
Apparently it doesn't, yeah.
So when you were thinking about going to law school and when you were in law school, did the element of having to attract your own clients appeal to you at all, or did you even think about that?
No, not at all. During law school, you're busy with all the exams and the stuff you have to learn. So you're busy with getting all the curriculum right, and then maybe figuring out which law firm you're going to work for. And then if you're lucky, you start working.
So did any of the partners that you worked with, did they train you in business development? Did you get any training?
I didn't get any training as such, but I think we did two things. So one was they obviously asked me to join some networking associations. So be part of associations where I could meet clients, potential clients, and just network in generally in Basel here. And the other part was I did get a sales training. So one of the partners, he always pushed the young attorneys to go through a sales training, which was, I think, 2 or 3 mornings, so 8 to 12 hours. I can't remember.
Okay. So now you own your own marketing firm. You're coaching attorneys on marketing and business development. How did you develop all that knowledge and that approach?
So I worked in a law firm for 2 years. And after that, I decided to do an MBA. So I went to Paris to HEC and did an MBA specializing in marketing and strategy, and then after that worked for a consulting company. So I think that MBA made a whole lot of sense to me. I think I thought back to my early days as a lawyer a couple of times and thought, okay, this would have been very helpful to know if I started looking at the legal business as well from that point of view. So it was through that, and then knowing what attorneys go through, I think that sort of suddenly fell together and then helped me to help lawyers, basically.
So what do you think attorneys should do if they're in the same situation you are? Attorneys aren't going to go to Paris and get an MBA and get a marketing mindset.
Well, I think the first thing is basically realizing that irrespective of how you're going to structure your legal career or what you're going to do in a legal career, you always have to become independent. One day you are the one who has to sort of develop the business. understanding what clients need, focusing on what clients need, be clever about what it is that you can do and want to do. So basically come up with a whole business case. And that's something that is really the responsibility of every lawyer. At some point, you have to understand that whether you want to be a sole practitioner, you want to be a partner in a small firm, or if you go to a big firm and want to become a partner there, I think becoming independent as a lawyer and as a sole practitioner is quite important. Um, in terms of getting started, I think it's three things that would be important. One is inspiration. So I think looking at what others are doing who are above you, so more senior associates or even partners, the kind of paths and techniques they use to develop their business, and understanding that there's different opportunities for you to do as well. Then you need some sort of training. You don't have to do an MBA, but I mean, these days there's a lot of different potential or opportunities to get some sort of training. And then the third part would be practice. So you have to start somewhere and then try and see what it is that you can do and want to do, what you're good at, what you like doing, and what works. And the more you do it, the better you actually get.
You spoke about the responsibility of business development or the kind of the fear of that responsibility. And I like to talk to young attorneys at- about it in different terms. I like to talk to them about control. Toby, you can't relate to this because you haven't been in the workplace 40 plus years like I have. The longer you work, the more control you want to have, the more important it becomes. And if you're an attorney and you're focused on relationship development and you build relationships from day one, you can pretty much chart your own course in terms of your career rather than being left to the whims of other people. You can decide what kind of areas you want to practice in. You can decide what kind of clients you want to work with. You can even work with friends, which can be very rewarding and a lot of fun. So I think that aspect of taking control and being intentional about what you're going to do with the next 40 years of practicing law to continue to make it compelling and exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, you can start small, right? You don't have to land like a very big client in the first year or so, but you start with people you already know, with your family, your friends. You start telling them what it is that you do, and sort of start building an understanding. And by that, you realize that some things are happening, and it's important within your firm as well to show people that you're willing to do that, and having these small, like, little successes will get you somewhere. And if you don't do that, like you said, control is a big thing, because if you don't do it, then you're going to end up like a pinball in a big machine in a firm, and people telling you what to do all your career, or even eventually you're not going to be able to progress. So I think that's never a good state to be in.
No, not at all. Not at all. We start with our associates before they even join the firm. I talk to every summer class that we have, and I have a series of assignments that I give them to focus on while they're there for their summer experience, and also when they go back to law school to set them on that relationship development path. I interview all of our lateral candidates, and I obviously cannot evaluate their legal skills, but I evaluate them on two factors. One is their coachability, and the other is how they fit culturally. And we believe that, we don't expect them to have a lot of business development skills, but you want to see if they have that inclination, and also if they're a coachable individual who's going to be willing to learn.
So what are the factors that you actually pay attention to when you evaluate somebody's capabilities to develop a business development skill?
There's a series of interviews, and all the rest of them are with attorneys in our firm. And, I'm different. I say that right from the beginning of the interview. I'm here to talk to you about something completely different. And it's interesting to see what their interest level is. I ask them about, the relationships that they have, the interests that they have outside the law, just to see if they're the kind of well-rounded individual who's going to be able to interact well with clients.
So there are some who maybe don't even pay too much attention to you because they think, okay, you're not a partner, you're just a business development executive.
Exactly. I recently interviewed, this was a potential lateral partner. I asked him one question at the very beginning of the interview. He talked for the next 15 minutes. That was not a good sign.
Before, you were talking about the process you have with the associate. So can you take us a little bit through how that works in your firm?
Sure. We have a series of, I guess, objectives for young associates. And they're broken down into three different categories or sections. The first is years 1 through 3 or 4, where the focus is on relationship development. And there's a series of objectives. Some of them are internal in nature, and some of them are external in nature. For example, one of the external ones that I harp on is to inventory their contacts and identify those with whom you want to focus on developing a long-term relationship. For some reason, that seems to be a very hard thing for people to do, but it's key to approaching your relationship development with intention.
So when you say inventory, what does an inventory look like? Is that an Excel spreadsheet, or is it a mind map, or what?
I tell them to make it as simple as possible. Actually, I have this very simple form that has several columns on it: name, um, organization, and then it has 4 rows, one for each quarter of the year, because I asked them to track how often they're in touch with these key individuals. You don't want to go several years and then try to have to reignite a relationship that you think is going to be important to you. I mean, obviously, the first thing that a young attorney has to do is become a very good attorney, and they got to focus on their skills and the practice of law. But you also can't ignore the business development, relationship development side. So then in the second phase, we call a focus on mastery, which is like years 4 through 6 or 7. It's a mixture of internal and external factors, a little bit more involved in relationship development, both with clients and with people that are just their contacts. And then finally, the last sector, right before becoming a partner, kind of for senior associates, is really focused 100% on relationship development. For the senior associates, we put the emphasis on the external because you should be more externally focused at that point because you've developed all those internal relationships that are critical.
When you say internal relationships, what do you mean by that exactly? I mean, why are these important, and how are associates supposed to do that?
Well, I think it's very important because that's where you're going to get your work. And that's how you're going to learn about the practice of law. And that's how you're going to learn about the firm and its clients. I tell associates to not just stay in the department that they're in. I'm in a mid-sized firm. Our attorneys are on 4 different floors. It's very easy if you're a litigator to come to work in the morning, go to the litigation floor, never leave it, and go down the elevator at the end of the day and not see anybody from corporate or labor and employment or any of the other practice groups. So I really emphasize the need to get around the office and interact with people in other groups. Form a good relationship. If you're a labor and employment attorney, form a good relationship with someone in corporate because someday you're going to need each other. And you're going to want that person that you know very well that you can hand your client off to when they have a problem that you can't address.
So it's probably also a way of practicing your networking skills, and by that also your business development skills, because you treat them as potential clients.
Absolutely. And I tell them to treat all of those people as clients. In a client relationship, you're offering advice, you're thinking in advance for someone, you're responsive, you return calls, you return emails, you establish that reputation as someone who can really be counted on. It's a good way to practice that.
Working with so many young attorneys, where do you see is the main struggle hidden for young attorneys?
I think the biggest struggle is that they're being pulled in 17 different directions. They're trying to learn their trade, and they have to learn how to navigate not just the law, but also the politics of working in a law firm. They also want to have a life outside the law. So they have other demands. Many young attorneys have families and relationships that they want to keep strong. And then I come along in the midst of all that and give them one more thing to do and have to convince them that that one more thing is very important for their long-term future.
So it's interesting because, I mean, all the seniors in your firm, they still pull these young associates into different directions, despite having gone through that same thing exactly as well. Do you also, I mean, when you talk to the business development to the more senior people, do they also get instructed to help young attorneys to develop their business development skills?
Well, absolutely. I encourage the more senior attorneys to give associates, client contact, find opportunities for them to interact with clients, which is one of the best things that a senior attorney can do to help a young associate learn. And then to provide immediate feedback on how things are going with regard to that communication. So if there are communication issues in the senior attorney, junior attorney relationship, I think it's the senior attorney's responsibility to address that and help the young attorney learn what they should be doing and what they should not be doing.
Yeah, I think the impact is massive, right? I mean, the impact of a senior lawyer in terms of how to develop a business and recognizing the fact that the importance of it is massive. When I look at friends of mine who went to law school with me, they work in the same firm, but they have completely different paths in terms of how they develop their business, the path they're taking, and it just very much depends on who within that law firm they're working with. And even for myself, I mean, the initial steps in terms of business development I took, I mean, I followed the steps that were suggested to me in the beginning. So this association that we met at a conference in last year was actually the first association that one of the partners suggested me to go to a couple of months after or weeks after I started in the legal career. And so I think that heavily influences how young attorneys perceive their business development.
I agree. The other thing that young attorneys can do is compare the work styles of the different attorneys with whom they're working, because that's a pretty good example of the range of people you're going to have to deal with when it's a client. Not every client is going to be the same and have the same expectations in terms of not just the work product, but communication, responsiveness, etc. I tell young attorneys there's really kind of people fall into two categories as far as, where is work? What is the status of a current assignment? There are those attorneys who, if they don't hear anything, they assume you're not doing anything. And so you have to keep them informed every step of the way. On the other hand, there are those attorneys, they don't want to hear about it until it's done. And so you have to figure out, which category does that person fall into? Clients are the same way. You have to know and have to adjust your game to meet that of the client that you're serving.
Well, internally, you probably only figure it out when you've done it the wrong way. Then they're going to quickly tell you about that. I could tell you about it. Enabling lawyers or young lawyers in terms of business development, and you called it control. I called it independence. Obviously, you enable young attorneys to get that control or that independence. Do you see it sometimes that firms think that it could be dangerous to educate young lawyers in that sense, enabling them? It could make them leave and venture out on their own at some point because they are independent.
Oh, I'm sure there are people who have that fear, but I think it's just the opposite. I think you've invested, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a young attorney, in the recruitment, compensation, and training, and, getting their skills up to the level where you want them to be. The last thing you want to see is that investment walk out the door. And I think one of the reasons that attorneys walk out the door, go to an in-house position in particular, is because they hit that business development wall. They've not developed their relationships. They've not paid attention to that. Then they've gotten to the point where they're a senior associate and they realize that their career path is going to be stalled unless they can develop it. And in some respects, it's just too little too late. So I think it's critical to invest in that relationship development mindset from day one in young associates.
Yeah, and if you want them to stay and eventually maybe have them as part of the partnership, you also don't want them to be or unable to develop their own business. That wouldn't be appreciated by the partnership, I guess.
Unfortunately, I hear stories of associates who come to interview who say, and these are people who are, well into their career, not just out of school, and they say, well, there was no path at the current firm because the partners, they hoard all the work. I mean, they don't want you to develop your work. I think that if you invest in young associates and they become great business developers, you're just going to make the pie that much bigger for everybody to have a bigger slice. So if you had to do it all over again, if you were starting out as a young lawyer, what would you do differently today?
Well, I think I would be a bit more proactive and think a bit longer and harder about the choice of firm I'm going to work for. My case was a bit special because after the bar exam, I directly did an LLM, which most lawyers do after a couple of years of working. But before I left the firm where I did my internship, they asked me if I want to come back after the bar exam, and I told them yes, but only a year after because I'm going to go do my LLM. So they said, yeah, that's fine. I felt quite good about myself, so I went back. But I think it would have been a good experience for me to see something else in terms of law firm culture. So I think in terms of attorney development and how the career path that you can have at a firm, I think I would be a bit more proactive and ask a couple of questions and have a little bit of a plan and be a bit more demanding myself and not just focus on whether someone pats me on the back and says, "You're a good guy, come back to us and here's your salary," and that's it. I mean, there's many law firms and it is a people's business, even internally, as you mentioned. So I think it heavily depends on who you're working with.
That's a great answer about, the importance of really approaching your career with intention, really asking the difficult questions. When I interview associates, sometimes I think, you could have asked a lot better questions. You could have asked some really good questions. Now is the time to find out what that culture is like in the firm, what the assignments are like, really to drill down and not to hesitate. But all that aside, I thought your answer would be listen to this podcast.
That's that's a good answer. And I mean, one thing that I also want to say is, I mean, it's obviously easy for us to say that now from in a retrospective and with all the experience. I mean, it is difficult to start a career and do all things right. But yeah, it's also on us, on the more senior people to help them.
Well, I think that was a really good discussion about the challenges young associates face and how they can address them. Tobi, it was great hearing your insights and your personal experience. Everybody has their own story, and I'm sure people can relate to aspects of that.
Thank you, Bill. See you next time.
You take care.